the owner of property at Sean Maroa.
Okay, so your property is not in the district?
As of this map,
Right.
it is not.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay? Thank you very much.
To clarify, your statement is you don't support doing this kind of designation. Am I understanding that correctly? You don't support designations such as this?
Well,
But
first,
he doesn't live in the district.
I would like to congratulate the board if they approve this after having eliminated the commercial. It was included at the beginning. I came and spoke and asked that the commercial have a...
As I need to wrap up your time.
Right. But
Do you have a
anyway,
shorter answer for me?
No, I don't support this, but I would
Okay.
like to congratulate the board for supporting small business by
you,
removing
ma'am.
the commercial.
Okay,
Thank you.
Additional comments on this item? Yes.
Good morning. Shannon Christian. I am a resident at 549 East Saginaw Way. That's well within the district. Historically, I haven't been there before around 1976, at which point we purchased a parcel, and developed from bare ground a single-family residence, which I still occupy, and hope to occupy many more happy years. I would support the application of the Historic District designation of this, but I would very much like to see the board direct staff to include in that designation that there shall not be any additional review or requirement imposed on any property within the district as a result of this designation, or because this is now a historic district. At that point, then I think all of the trepidation of where this may lead goes away. I'm just as concerned as anyone else about what happens on the land around me. It happens that I was one of those last possible uses of a weed patch. We split that from the owner of the original property, and I filled it in, and the neighbors seemed to like what I did. And I get along with them pretty well. So, I didn't build a duplex or do something strange or inappropriate for that neighborhood. And that's pretty well the way it's been. The way this land has been designated, this area has gotten it where it is today. And it's the people like myself that live there that have gotten it the way it is today. I expect us to continue to support that and support new development in that area. And I expect it'll be compatible. The existing land use statutes in the county seem to have been okay and allowed us to get where we are. So with a shall not add to our burdens included, you have my hearty support, and I would thank you for your time.
And you live in the county portion on Saginaw, not the city portion?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Thank
morning.
you.
Morning, Madam Chairperson, members of the board. Jeff Roberts. I'm speaking on behalf of Fair to See Me that owns the property on Van Ness at 4780 North Van Ness. It's at the corner of Santa Ana. And we too had some concerns about this district. I think everything I've heard here this morning, everything I've heard from Mr. McFarland and talking with the Fig Garden homeowners increases our comfort level with this district. We actually have several pending applications, one for a parcel map and one for a variance on this property. The property that I'm speaking of is developed with an older, not historic home that we intend to remove and then build 2 new homes. We just want to have the ability to go through the process, whatever that regular process is. But hearing what I've heard this morning, I think we're very comfortable with the creation of the historic district, and for a variety of reasons. So I appreciate the time the Fig Garden homeowners have spent working with us. I appreciate the time the staff has spent, and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Did you have any comment on the prior speaker's comment that we should include in the designation, there shall not be required any additional review or requirements based on the designation?
I think that's a pretty good idea.
Okay.
I had actually sent an email to Supervisor Anderson that had something of similar
Like that.
wording, but I think he said it very clearly, and I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is the only portion that has been taken out now the triangle? Is every other pink portion is part of the old, it's part of the
And the commercial,
property owners?
commercial and Shaw.
So the people in the triangle are part of the Sunnyside, got Sunnyside on my mind, Old Fig Property Owners Association, there are people in that triangle that are part of that as
Yes,
well,
there are
correct?
some.
But everything, there's nothing else that's excluded?
I think there were a couple little minor adjustments to the second map. Bernard.
Anybody who speaks, please come to the podium, and I do want to keep
Excuse me, there's
with
just that
public
little small
presentation.
corner that was left out by mistake. You would want to include that in.
Okay.
Okay. And we have additional public comment, I believe, before we close the public comment. Please, come join us.
Hi, Prudence Zaleski, Fig Garden resident, member of the Fig Garden Homeowners Association, and on the Police Protection District Commission. I'm here to speak in favor of this application, which has been approved by the Fresno County Historic Landmarks and Records Advisory Commission. I served on that commission for 10 years, and we routinely approved, researched and approved applications that came before it, presented it to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors then passed those applications. Many of those applications were for homes in Old Fig. The designation has always been to the list of historic places, and it has been considered an honorary one. The Historic Landmarks and Records Advisory Commission is not a standards enforcement agency. Sierra Sky Park is now on the list. Shaver Lake is on the list of Centennial Communities. The Barton Opera House is number 3 on the list, and that no longer stands. There is a parking lot on that property right now. So things can be changed. Therefore, I see this designation of Old Fig as something very positive for the community and for the area at large. It is an effort by community members who put in their own time and effort to do this, and we're not compensated for this. It is an effort for them to say that we are aware that we have something very special and beautiful and unique and historic in Old Fig. The Fig Garden has historic roots, both literally and figuratively, and these roots, I think, need to be recognized. We want to place Fig Garden on this list. That's all it is a positive list for Fresno, and I think Fresno needs some positive lists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Supervisors. My name is Larry Domme. I live in Fresno. I own property in this designated area. I've spent, since the first notifications came out in January, I've spent hours debating about what I wanted to say, and I was really objectioning to this. It seems like a terrible expense right now for the county to go through, considering comments just made here earlier this morning on other issues about health, safety, and police protection, maintaining the jail, keeping prisoners in jail, etc. I won't go there. I've just done it. What I hear today, it lessens my fears a little bit about more layers of government bureaucracy and more control on people's property. I keep hearing that this is more of an honorarium type of a thing. It's not a controlling issue. It's just to give it maybe a plaque out there saying this is a very special area. And I have to agree. There's some wonderful properties in this area. There's some part of the area that I don't really think fits. But I think the gentleman's remark, I wish I'd remember his name, that was before Mr. Roberts, about stating, if you do choose to approve it, that there is no further layers of more jurisdiction, more hearings, more meetings, more issues. I think the county does a great job with their current codes and planning commission. I'm leaning more towards, if that's the way it goes, I wouldn't be too objectionable. I know it's been a long meeting, so I'll cut it short. Thank you very much.
We appreciate you joining us this morning.
Good morning. Louise Yanofkin. I'm the current president of the Fig Garden Homeowners Association. Two things I wanted to clear up. When the first application was put in, the actual boundaries were taken directly from the Fig Garden General Plan. Those boundaries never included commercial on Shaw. Commercial on Shaw is exempt from our boundaries anyway. The entire area in the first application is what is considered Fig Garden. That's in the Fig Garden plan. We came back and we excluded the triangle portion. The portion at the top was just accidentally excluded. There is a homeowner that wanted to be excluded. His property was excluded as well. So this is, again, the same designation that you just gave to Sierra Sky Park. And Prudence did mention the other areas throughout Fresno that has this designation. What we are moving forward to do is we have also applied for a Caltrans grant, which will allow us to improve the area some more. The city came to us and said, we are putting in high density along Blackstone. How do you want to see yourself in this area? We are completely around you. We'd like to work with you. We've been in meetings with John Dugan as to how can Fig Garden preserve itself with this high density and growth going in all the way around us. This is one of the designations, again, an honorary designation that will allow us to beautify the area. We would then like to put signs in, you are now entering or exiting Old Fig Garden. And again, we hope for your support. We look forward to working with the city as well to preserve our area and with Caltrans. So I hope that clears up some of the issues that occurred with, is commercial in, is commercial out? It was actually never in. Commercial is not in our Fig Garden plan. Thank you.
Okay, additional public comment? I don't see any. I'm going to close the public component and bring back for further board discussion.
Well, I would like to make a motion that we approve the designation and authorize the chair to execute the certificate. I'm just, I mean, I would like to include, and maybe I'll do this first, to include the triangle and the...
When you say the triangle, can you help to clarify that?
The triangle, if people are still opposed to that, then we'll do this triangle. That's in the plan, and that was originally in the request. And then the other piece I would like to include is that little piece up here that was left out by accident. The on Fairmont, that's the Fig Garden Place PUD. And whatever else is included in that little piece that's residential that was left out, that's included in the Fig Garden plan. So, and I mean, unless people feel strongly about not including this, I mean, I would like to include it. I think it fits. I think it's not fair to these people to not include them. And it's kind of, you know, just doesn't make sense to me. But if the majority of the board would approve the rest of it without the triangle, then I would support that also. But I think really, just out of respect for the people who live there, we should include them.
Madam Chair, I'll second that motion, and, you know, I was the one that did ask that triangle be taken out, but I understand the lady that spoke who lives in the area. I'll understand her request, and the gentleman who spoke and asked for other criteria to put into play to make it clear, you know, the statement that was made, Bernard, about this doesn't rise to higher levels. If that statement was included in this motion, I would second the motion.
That the designation itself does not add any further, how would we say that, Bernard, to include in the motion?
more regulatory.
I mean, I think we're
regulations.
basically just stating what the law is. The designation itself does not add anything, but if we're
Yeah,
going to put
any
that in
additional
motion.
requirements for evaluating individual properties. I would just want to confirm with Kevin if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so the designation itself does not,
Does not require any additional
Requirements.
be placed on individual properties.
And I want to underscore the reason why that was my concern last time, and I feel better about it now, is, you know, the last thing I want is for anybody in that triangle or anybody anywhere in that area going to any group of folks now saying, now I want your permission so I can paint my house, or, I mean, that's nonsense.
no, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, and that's what makes it clear, so.
But you stated shall not require any, not will not.
Does not require.
What I wrote down is
I
there
want-
shall not be required any additional review or requirements based on this designation. I believe it's in the tape, and our speaker was very eloquent.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Maybe
Same thing.
he would
All right.
present
That's
us
part of
with
your
the
motion.
wording he spoke.
And that's part of, it doesn't require anything. I mean, I don't believe it does.
Yeah,
It doesn't
but
mean,
It's very definite, saying there shall not be.
right, the designation does not. But I don't want to lead people to think that this is a historic area. It always has been, whether or not without this designation. People will bring that up when things are, if something weird is coming up to be developed in this area, that's still part of the conversation, and it will be with or without this designation.
And I didn't support it last time either for the same concerns Supervisor Perea just raised, property rights issues, concerns on more regulation, more bureaucratic tape if you want to do something with your property. Actually, the agenda item has been reworded in a way that I feel like I'm happy to support it now. We're not saying that this entire area is historic Old Fig Garden, because I do not believe that. But I do believe that it is Old Fig Garden, and it is a historic, many parts of it are a historic area. So I'll call for the question.
We would. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, it moves forward.
We now move to item number 6 under the Administrative Office, adopt resolution proclaiming continuation of the local emergency status as a result of the 2009 drought-related unemployment food crisis.
Motion approved?
Second.
Any other discussion?
I just would add that this drought regulation is still in effect. Even though they've increased 40% water on the west side, we still have 8,000 people unemployed in the Mendota city alone. We got people unemployed in Firebaugh, Tranquility, San Joaquin, Huron. So it's a very important issue that we keep before the public, because it's very important that those folks, some way, somehow, we get this back to where we have normal farming operations where people can be hired. So that's why.
And colleagues, I really asked to have this as a discussion, and let me be direct about my concern. I'm very supportive of this because it will continue to allow us to assist residents that have lost their jobs in our county. My concern was a continued declaration of drought when we've had a year of more than average rainfall. I think it gives those who like to say, well, we have a drought, therefore we don't have to give water to the west side. I want to make sure that message doesn't get sent, because we do have surface water. Yes, I understand groundwater's not totally replenished, and there are challenges there, but I don't want to give anybody a pass to say the reason our farmers don't get water is because it didn't rain this year, because it rained a lot. And I think, again, it's how the issue becomes framed, and we need to be forever advocating for our agricultural community to make sure they get adequate water supplies. And this year, of all years, 150% of normal average rainfall, they're getting 40% of their water allocation, and that's not because of a drought.
Because of what we talked about earlier on the other issues, because of regulations. That's
Yeah.
why we're not getting it.
Yeah, and so that was my interest in making sure as this went forward, we at least had that dialogue.
Are you combining both 6 and 7 then?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
And the
there's
motion is for 6 and 7?
Yes.
any public comment on item 6 or 7? Seeing none, those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Move on to item number 8.
We're now on item 8, under the Administrative Office, conduct a public hearing to consider proposed reductions in the adopted budget of the Department of Behavioral Health for fiscal year 2009 in accordance with provisions of Section 1442.5 of the Health and Safety Code, and approve amendment to the Fresno County Salary Resolution due to the consolidation of positions in multiple organizations of the Department of Behavioral Health and the transfer of 16 positions from the Coroner Public Administrator Public Guardian's Office pursuant to Personnel Rule 11023, transfer of functions, resulting in a net reduction of 4 positions effective June 28, 2010, and adopt resolution designating the local mental health director as conservator of the estate under the Letterman Petrus short effective June 28, 2010.
Donna?
Donna Shaler, Department of Behavioral Health. First up, I would like to ask that we bring back item number 3 in June. We found a couple of errors in the appointment document, so we'll bring it back in June.
Which item is that?
Number 3.
You know, I
number
think we
3,
have the changes in front of us, Donna.
There were some additional changes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And that's at the dais with the redlining.
Right. As far as the program reduction, we are talking about reducing our day treatment program. This is, we spent the entire year, this last year, trying to work on that program with Fresno Unified. We were finding that the children in the program, the school was not getting the grade results that we wanted. So we worked all year on the milieu. We still found that those children did not get their grades did not come up to what the school district expected. So they decided to, they also had financial issues. So we had 3 teachers there. They did not fund those faculty for next year, which meant without the teachers, we could not have a day treatment program. Now, what we have agreed to do is to work with the school, and we are working with Clovis, Fresno County Office of Ed, and Central and other school districts about how do we provide mental health services to your severely mentally ill children who can't make it in SED classrooms. And so what we're doing now is we're working with all the SELPAs to talk about that. Fresno Unified has approximately 8 children that will still come to Heritage for independent study. The independent study is a little bit different because they will provide staff to do independent study on a daily basis, and then we will provide mental health. So all of these children, we will continue to provide mental health. It just won't be in a day treatment setting. And again, even if we wanted to, we couldn't because of the fact that it would require teachers, and we don't have teachers. The reduction in staffing has to do with when you don't have a day treatment program, our rec therapist is not a, rehab services are not an included services under AB 3632. And so the rec therapists, that's what they do. They allow us to provide mental health, and they allow us to provide case management under AB 3632, but not rehab. And so we made the decision to eliminate those positions because they couldn't bill for their services.
Questions of Mrs. Taylor? Let me open it up for public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to comment on item number 8? Item number 8. I don't see any public members. Then I will close the public comment. And
I would move approval of the recommended actions
Second.
1 and 2.
any further comment? All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Madam Chair, that takes you to your addendum item. The first one is addendum item A under the Administrative Office, discuss strategies and provide staff direction in mitigating reduction of 59 deputy sheriffs, direct staff to reestablish budget orgs for Sheriff's Department as designated prior to fiscal year 2005-2006.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I had asked a few weeks back if the board would consider, in light of the fact that the sheriff has submitted her budget, which does show the reduction of, in addition to other positions, the 59 deputy sheriff filled positions that are slated to be deleted as a part of this year's budget. And in light of the fact of what we've seen in terms of public safety in this community, what has happened with all the jail releases, and we certainly see it documented on a daily basis in the media, the impact it's having on our neighborhoods. I think the absolute last message, and I know we all agree that we should send in our community, is laying off 59 deputy sheriffs who are providing critical patrol services in our neighborhoods throughout this county is not the right choice to make at this time. And I understand that there's a lot of pressures in other county departments that are feeling the same type of crunch in the programs that they provide. I just happen to believe rolling into budget sessions, it's imperative that we talk today about how we mitigate those 59 layoffs. And I know I have sent some ideas to you all as well as to our CEO for discussion. And I want to talk about today possibly making broad policy sweeps with respect to the different budget cost centers that we have in the county, and direct our CEO to find the money necessary through those broad policy sweeps to mitigate the impacts of these 59 layoffs in the Sheriff's Department, and in essence, stop the layoffs of the deputy sheriffs. So I'll leave it there for now. Just that was basically the concept I wanted to introduce today.
Well, I would want to include the layoffs in the district attorney's office too. I mean, and probation, because those three departments work together. So we are going to take cuts, and we are going to take cuts in the justice departments, but I don't think we should just look at one of those departments. We have to look at the DA's office, the public defender's office, and probation. They're taking cuts also. And I think that, I mean, in some ways, I'm more concerned about the cuts in the DA's office and public defender's office, because that's actually going to cost us more money.
Well, the item I have that's on the agenda today is specific, if we want to take action, it's specific to the 59 deputy sheriff positions. If we want to bring back another item at the next meeting regarding the departments you've referenced, we could do that too.
But I think if we're going to talk about broad strategies, got to include all of them.
Let me ask if the sheriff is maybe ready to at least give an overview as to what it would take. I'm very concerned about proposed layoffs. I realize there's a 30-day noticing requirement. This board has not taken action on any such reduction. I'm also interested in the cost to preserve jail space, because, you know, that's the other area that for people to feel safe in their homes, we really need to be mindful of. And I agree, the entire justice system, and maybe there's a way we take them with a budget hearing component even before the budget hearings to kind of look at the safety services in general, because I think the way you find funding for departments is to put the money in there first. And then, even though other proposals come up again and again and again to fund other things, you put the money in safety services first. And that is then not something somebody goes back and says, well, gee, I want some of that. I mean, that would be something I would like to see us do. So, Madam Sheriff, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and I believe for budget hearings this year, we will go on the first day.
Okay.
So that will happen. The 59 deputy sheriffs, and I want to remind the board, this is not my recommended budget. This is the budget to meet the number given to me by the CAO's office. My recommended budget was not to lay off any positions with the sheriff's office. However, I was obligated to meet the number given by the CAO's office, and I did that. The 59 deputy sheriffs, just for those particular jobs, would be $7.8 million. That my request is, like Supervisor Perea's, is to see if there is funding in net county cost from somewhere. And I've also talked to board members with some ideas on different pools of money or some projections on costs that we might be able to help mitigate this
And again,
cost.
the amount you're looking for?
$7.8 million.
$7.8 million.
For the 59 deputy sheriffs.
Okay. And could you refresh my memory, what's the cost for one jail floor?
$3 million.
Per floor?
Yes.
Okay.
That includes staff and the food to feed the inmates.
I mean, I know we all meet individually with department heads. I'm just wondering if there's a process, and maybe it doesn't end up as a debate, but more of a presentation by all the justice services prior to our budget hearing, so we get that broad overview. We have that kind of sense as we go forward to do our work on the proposed budget. But it kind of sets a stage before we get to the budget hearings where those decisions will have to be made, but it might get a better perspective. I don't know if other board members would have an interest in just having a workshop presentation.
I'm happy to do that. And I'd like to talk about some broad direction, as you referred to, some ideas, and then send our CAO out. And, we're always looking for more money. In years past, there has been more money. This year, it's pretty fragile around here as far as the numbers go. And we're trying to get as close as we possibly can. I would like to direct our CAO to, I have a few ideas, if that's what you want to discuss now, a few suggestions, and have you go out. But I don't want them to spend a lot of time and energy pursuing some of these if it isn't a consensus of this board to do that. So I'd like to make 4 suggestions and then have board input and then hear other people's suggestions. I do think that there's a little bit out there we can do. I mean, we're going to cut services and supplies if we're willing to do that. Are we willing to eliminate our travel? Are we willing to, I'd like to look at our workers' comp contract. I don't know who we're with. I think we're with State Farm. I'd like to think about rebidding that out to see. I think it's always good to get bids and see if, someone else would be more competitive. I'd like to look at our contracts that we have in place in net county departments, and anything that was agreed to in the last 18 months that just automatically renews at a price. I'd like to give our CAO the authority to look at that and go back and try to save us 5 or 10% on some of the large contracts that were maybe negotiated early on that were just automatic renewal. Times are tough out there. They're tough for everyone, and I don't think anyone would be surprised if we came back with a contract that we said, we need to save 10% on this contract for our net county cost departments. I don't think there's any question, after listening to our fleet audit last week, there are other jurisdictions that are saving a lot of money outsourcing some of their services. And I would like to direct or ask the CAO to go back to every one of our net county departments and maybe even other places to look at areas where we could outsource some of the services that we are receiving. Now, that's going to take time, and that's going to take energy, and that's going to cost us staff time. I want to make sure that, those 4 proposals that I just mentioned, I want to make sure that there's a consensus on this board. So if it comes back that the workers' comp, we can save money on that, there's a consensus that this board will consider it, seriously consider it. On the outsourcing, I know that, it's an issue that might tend to be a little controversial, but if you come to if the CAO can find areas where we can save several $1 million outsourcing some of these, I wouldn't recommend it 5-6 years ago when we had the money to do this. But now is a different time. And so I think it's something, if this board would consider looking at, that we should consider. But I don't want them to spend their time and energy. I really don't, because they don't have the time and energy. And it would affect our departments, every department as well, because they're going to have to spend the time and energy. But I think last week you saw with the fleet audit that there's plenty of room in the outsourcing area to save plenty of money. I, for one, am willing to look at that and would be willing to seriously consider that area. But we have to make sure everybody else is willing to seriously consider, and not just talk about saying, yeah, I'll consider it. Tell us now. If you're not willing, because I believe that does that take a 4/5 vote to do some of that? No, if we do it in budget time.
It will still be a forfeit. You will be displacing county employees. So it will require a 4/5 vote. And there is significant work to be done, which we could do. Along the same lines, to close any budget gap of this magnitude, be it 7.8, not including probation, not including the DA, not including public defender, I would say everything's on the table from every department, on every service, from all the fleet, being sheriff, GSA being bid out, security, building maintenance, anything you can think of that is currently being done by county employees that could be done by the private sector it would take that magnitude. I mean, it would be massive, but it's something that we can do. So they would be, in simple terms, no sacred cow.
And I think it's very, oh, excuse me.
I would just say, this is going to take massive staff time. What's your estimate on that? I mean, I realize that's a loaded question. Do you have an estimate on the amount of staff time it would take? Because that's going to be expensive.
Very expensive. I'd have to return to your board. I would not even want to venture a guess because you're dealing with a number of departments that has varied services that are currently being done by county employees, which has impacts with labor. You know, but as you've mentioned earlier, that is an undertaking I would take on with my county staff to deal with work with departments. But I want to make sure if that's the road we go down, that everyone's full aware there's nothing that won't be viewed. Everything is on the table, because for the type of dollars you're looking for, you're not going to get there with one or two type of bidding out projects. I mean, it's everything.
With our county staff with our county employees having the opportunity to bid it as well, we've done that in some areas where our departments can bid the service as well if we put it out to bid, if that's the decision. You know, this is lean, and you can't come up with 7.8 or 9.2 or $10 million without additional cuts or additional tough decisions. And so I feel it's so important, as I know that everyone here does, to, if we are able to, if we have a carryover, if we have, I want to have this board say, yes, we want it to go to public safety. I want it to go to public safety, not just the sheriff. I think we have to include the DA, and we have to include probation. And we've been talking about our priorities for a real long time here. Well, let's get them on the table.
I just want to comment on the outsourcing, because I'm not opposed to outsourcing if it saves money in the long run. But many times when you look at outsourcing, you save money in the first or second year, but then it ends up costing more down the road. But if we're going to look at outsourcing the fleet, then we should also include outsourcing the sheriff's fleet. I'm not interested in putting a burden on all the other departments to give the money to the sheriff's department when they're spending more money than they should be spending for certain things. So if we're going to look at outsourcing fleet, we need to look at outsourcing the sheriff's fleet along with it.
Well, I think we
weren't even willing to look at the audit of the sheriff's fleet.
We've been talking about that a long time, too, and I think if, I don't want to speak for the sheriff, and it's not my place, and maybe, I don't know if today's the right time, but, with the numbers we got last week with the audit, tell us if you're I believe that you're competitive. I believe that you're even less in some of those areas.
We are less.
Maybe we ought to let the sheriff take over our entire fleet.
We should have we can't let the sheriff audit her own fleet. I mean, we should have an independent auditor do that.
But we don't need to do that. We don't need to spend the money to audit her fleet if, we've cut the budget enough.
Standards.
I mean, she's taken $16 million cut over whatever the time frame is. She needs to be within her fleet budget. Now, we've gone through this before. We can sit here and
Well, fleet is within their fleet budget, too. I mean, I don't want to create double standards.
We already, we don't have double standards. We already outsource. We have contracts outsourced with private companies that do our services at a very, very competitive cost. We put out an RFP, they bid, and we use those for 600 or 500 vehicles or 5 pieces of equipment. We have 2 mechanics, and what they can't get done, we outsource. So we're already there, and I believe the county can use those contracts to do the same thing with other county vehicles. So they can piggyback on my outsourcing contract.
Well, I thought we were talking about outsourcing. Are you talking about just outsourcing, like, the maintenance of the cars?
possibly. I don't think there are any sacred cows in this anymore.
I agree, including the sheriff.
If we're going to If
gotta look at everything.
If we're going to try to take a lean budget and make it leaner and come up with $7, $8, $9, $10 million, I don't even know, I'm not sure that it's possible to get that deep into it. Well, it is possible. I take that back. It is possible, but there's going to be some tough choices, and there's going to be continued cuts. It's possible to do it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Larson.
Yeah, I would concur with Supervisor Pachigian, but I would also go back, we have a constitutional obligation to provide public safety to our citizens. And any extra money that we find, I would direct to public safety, sheriff, DA, and probation. That's where I'm at, that's what I will do, and it's going to hurt other departments, but we are obligated by law to provide public safety to our citizens, and so therefore I stand on that recommendation.
I certainly support looking at outsourcing of services, but to get back to the core of the issue, we just had an agenda item for a mandatory furlough application to 3 bargaining units. Now, what wasn't said in that dialogue is those 3 bargaining units, I believe we've had discussions with, they get a 3% raise this year. Everybody else in the county has taken a cut. Everybody else in the county has taken a cut. And I understand that's painful for families that are kind of wanting things to be normal, but this is not normal times. It's not normal for anybody. So I don't see, I think every stone ought to be turned over. I mean, the only reason we potentially discuss outsourcing is we think it might be less expensive. Why is it less expensive? We've got a system that's too expensive. I think we should look at our whole package. I want to treat employees fairly. I think they do a great job in Fresno County. I don't think they receive huge wages. I think our benefit package is too rich, whether it's pension, whether it's paid time off so that we don't get full use of that full year of 40 hours a week. We do have a very generous paid time off policy. I think we ought to look at all those things because, we're going to go to the onesies and twosies, but there are some really big issues that have a way of just being the white elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. I think we have to talk about it. Last week with the audit of the cars, I think we ought to get rid of the 244 cars that have less than 500 miles per month driven on them. I mean, that's a big one. Yes, everybody's going to say, oh, well, they're for a grant, therefore you shouldn't have to worry about them. I don't think any group should get a particular exception to the pain all the other groups are sharing. I commend the Sheriff Deputies Association. They were the first organization that came forward and said, we're going to do a furlough. You spread it out over all the payroll periods so it doesn't hurt every month. But we're going to do that because we know the county is just got to get some right sizing done. So I'd like to look at services and supplies unless it's mandated in a contract. I think travel and training should be off the list for everybody. We have, I think they're called webinars. I heard that term new. Instead of going to a seminar, you get to stay at the Hilton, you get to stay in San Francisco, it's a couple days away from the office. Go online and get your education. There's no reason not to. I use that as a personal practice because I have credentials I need to keep up. Workman's comp, we ought to look at that. Unemployment. We have, and I'm not sure how these departments would deal with it. Unemployment used to be when you were in a job as a full-time person, paid for whatever length of time, and you lost your job. Unemployment assisted you until you found another job. Now the way the rules are written, hey, come in and work for 2 weeks and get unemployment for the next 52 weeks. We're upside down in that whole system. The only way to deal with that directly is to look to see, instead of hiring seasonal staff, how else we spread our staff to those fluctuations in need. I'd like to look at that. So to me, service supplies, travel, workman's comp, all contracts with automatic renewals that are maybe a nice but not a necessary mandated, outsourcing services, looking at unemployment to try to reduce our seasonal employees because we still pay. They may only be here part of the time, but we still pay through the unemployment process. And I think cars, you start with those that are driven less than 500 miles, and I think you expand that as necessary. I think we drive around too much. So, you know, and I'm one who has to drive around a lot. I have 1,000 square miles of a territory to cover and to meet people in the communities, but I think we got to look at the big things. I think we also need to look at our realigned programs. We spend, I believe, $16 million more than we get in realignment. Is that correct, Kathleen? Am I in the right neighborhood?
If you're looking at realignment eligible programs in excess of your realignment that
Right.
you collect, I haven't actually seen the chart for this year yet. I believe in
But
prior
we've been
years
in
it
the
was closer to
16 million.
20. Yeah.
16 to 20 million dollars. And that becomes, whenever you spend more than you're getting in realignment, that becomes a reduction in available revenue for our general fund departments. There you go. There's the sheriff's department, the jail probation, DA, ag department, which has had huge impacts on exotic pests this year. So, I mean, we have a lot of other departments. As long as we spend more on the social services side, we don't have the money for public safety and others. And so I've been very steady in my support for keeping those services intact. So I think we ought to look at any program that's discretionary within realignment and really pull that back, because that's money that could keep the jail open.
Are there any discretionary services in realignment that we haven't already cut?
That we have discretion over?
My understanding is the only thing that's funded are the required share of cost and the required match for
We've already cut everything
realignment.
else.
But I think what I'd like to see, and I don't know how exactly you do this, but the required share of match or the maintenance of effort or whatever, well, the share of match, I guess, or if we give 11 million, we're giving 11 million, I think we need to say, okay, if we don't give that 11th million, what goes? If we don't give the 10th and the 11th million, what goes? If we don't give 9, 10, and 11, what goes? And maybe we don't have options there, but
I think we've already used up our options there, because what goes is that we then have to provide more county money to provide mandatory services, and we don't get the federal and state money to do that. We've had this conversation many times, but we can have it again. But there's no way of saving money there without increasing more things that you have to pay out of the general fund. I think it would actually do the opposite of what you're proposing that we do.
Then you would drop programs, wouldn't you?
You drop programs, but the county, but you can't say, hey, if we have a kid that needs to go in foster care, we're not going to put him in foster care? No, we put him in foster care, then we pay for it out of county
Well, I
dollars.
understand that, but sometimes you're going to be dropping that, unfortunately, you're going to be dropping that type of a program, and
No, you
and that's
can't
a
drop
killer.
that kind of program.
Well, I agree with you. I'm just telling you what the
well, I think we need
possibilities
to look at everything again. I mean, I think it needs to be looked at again if there's any possibility, if there's anything out there. It needs to come, I think every department needs to.
discretion.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think we should be washing anybody's car. Okay, that was $168,000.
Including sheriff cars?
I don't think we ought to be washing anybody's car. Somebody that takes their car home, it's parked in front of their yard, they ought to wash it.
To get to the number that we're talking about, we really need to focus in on large ticket items. And those are going to be typically, do we continue to fund the Amador plan, fire protection? Do we put out to bid public defender? Do we put out to bid large scale operations? That's what it's going to take to begin to address the dollar amount that you're really referring to. The car washes, you're going to say.
No, but John, you know what, you got a car wash here, that's a deputy and a little more. You've got something else from some other department, that's another deputy, that's a district attorney. I mean, it all adds up.
I don't disagree with that.
Couple
but
$100,000 here, couple $100,000 there, before you know it, you got $1 million.
I don't agree with that. I don't disagree with that. But my point being, they're small chunks, and they're going to get us there. But really, to begin to address the size of the deficit that you want to address, you have to look at large ticket operations.
Well, isn't it true that some of the items that we do are regulated mandatory programs that the state backs up? And from what we were told in the April receivables at the state, they were $3.4 billion short in tax money, and therefore they felt that they were not going to have enough money to make their state match to draw down federal funds in certain programs. And if they can't draw down federal funds in certain programs, that means there are certain programs in the county that we're not going to be able to take advantage of.
And that scenario is yet to play itself out. Yes, the state is off by roughly $4 billion on the personal income tax that they had anticipated. The sales tax was clicking up the first 3 months, but it was wiped out with loss on the personal income tax that they were planning for. And yes, even though we have received the May revise, it's a bit of a poker game at this point at the state level. There's a lot on the table, but no one's yet dealing the hand that we'll ultimately have to live with.
Are there any programs that we currently run for the state that have, that we could get back to the state? I mean, we struggle with their mandates. They say, we want this. We have programs they have sent to the county and increased county's share of cost, and they somehow keep thinking that they can keep doing that and we'll pick it up. But we're at the end of the pickup. There is no more money. Do we have programs that would save us cost to just hand them back to the state and say, here, you want this, you run it?
And they bill
I think
us.
we should look at what opportunities there are there, because we end up spending county dollars, and it erodes our ability to fund locally significant, the most important elements. I mean, government has to protect its citizens. That's first and foremost. Government has to protect its citizens, and we've found that we have so many other demands of funding and other directions that we're not feeling like it's where it needs to be, so we need to give up some of the other things to be able to do that.
You know, the Madam Chair, some of the ideas that I've had and just listening, I'm encouraged by this conversation. Actually, your point right now is an interesting one.
Thank you.
You know, I don't think elected officials have been challenged the way we are and have been the last couple of years and probably will be the next 2 or 3, like those electeds that were in the Great Depression. I mean, that's really how serious it is what we're dealing with. But what's not happening, at least I don't see at any local or state level, whether it's city councils, board of supervisors, or school boards. Nobody's talking about how to change how we do business at a broader scale. You know, we're trying to find cubbyholes of dollars to help our program survive. You know, and that's just by way of saying, I don't want to go too far off track, but I really think it's time for us to start talking about changing our relationship with the state of California, not just as Fresno County, but counties in general. You know, and I've brought this issue up at our statewide association. Still hasn't gotten traction yet, but we really do. And one great example is the governor right now is looking at releasing thousands of prisoners back into our communities and giving us not even half the cost of keeping them in our jails. You know what? Some county has to stand up and say, no, thank you. We're not going to take your deal, get your half the cost of funding this program. Then a year later, they're going to take the funding away, and it's 100% cost of the county. We just have to be able to, at some point, stand up and say, no, we're done. And then the discussion goes from there, major policy changes. But that's for another day. Today, and I think dealing with the 59 deputy sheriffs is probably a good model to use. I think it's a good idea maybe to have a pre-budget hearing on the justice system itself. But if we can figure this out today with the deputy sheriffs, we can use that model moving forward. John, you're right. You know, you take 100,000 here and there. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. It really does. It just, I mean, taking the car washes away, getting rid of the 150 cars, that's over $1 million. I mean, all that starts adding up. And, you know, I look at the action we took today on item 42. We sold a piece of property to the Selma Hospital to a firm. We got $950,000. We put it in a fund today, which is good. But you know what? That's 7.3 deputy sheriffs. We just whittled down that reduction if we make a decision today to move that money to close part of that gap. We have in the 7,000 services and supplies series countywide, $497 million in that account. And account 7415, transportation, travel, and education, is $1.5 million in that account. Now, recognizing that a lot of these funds too could be federal and state dollars, so we won't get a dollar for dollar match out of them. We do get a piece of it though, about 30 cents on the dollar. Well, I think the kind of direction we need to give our CEO today is go into countywide services and supplies, look at this $340 or $497 million account, and find us X millions of dollars. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Maybe looking at that $1.5 billion travel countywide, we just whack that right in half, or all of it. we have to take those kind of strokes, I believe, today to start closing this gap. I think if we use that as a model, we're going to get there. Our fund balance, I know it's at 0 this year. I think that's, and Vicki, you may think I'm wrong, but I don't think that's a good estimate to make. I think we're underestimating what we're going to carry over to next year. I think it's going to be more than 0.
What do you think it's going to be?
Do you agree or disagree, or?
Vicki Crowe, Auditor, Controller, Treasurer Tax Collector. The current year fund balance projected for June 30, 2010, I don't think there's going to be a carryover. And the reason for that, typically, what carries over year in fund balance is made up 80% of countywide revenue projections that came in above what we budgeted in the current fiscal year. We are projecting to receive $4 to $5 million less than what we budget in the current fiscal year. So we're going to be negative, if you will, at June 30. So the question is, looking backward, what did we budget this current fiscal year for fund balance versus what we actually realized in June 30, 2010? There is a couple of $1 million in additional fund balance that we've identified there. So yes, I believe there's a couple of $1 million in fund balance, but in the current year, we're $4 to $5 million upside down.
Okay, so that'll close that gap.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, that's
where
not
we
good
are.
news, but it's news, okay?
Yeah. Vicki, can you?
But let me finish. I'm
I
sorry.
want to ask
just
her a question.
Couple
while
more
she's up
things.
here.
Oh, go ahead.
Perea finish his comments. You have just a question for Vicki Crowe related to his.
No, go ahead. Just stay close.
Stay what?
No, I'm asking Vicki to stay because I want to ask her a question.
Yeah, so I see it as two levels. One is, well, we've talked about the broader thing, do we start contracting out different operations of the county? I don't see that as something that discussion is going to happen in the next 2-3 weeks, and we're going to find that money. You're talking about if we give that direction, that's what's going to position us for next budget year, because next budget year is not going to be any better. But those are the kind of discussions that we need to start giving direction on.
Sure.
The immediate is, okay, if we're going to help the sheriff and the DA and probation and the public defender, what do those numbers look like, and what direction do we give? So I come back to today's action item is for eliminating the reduction of 59 deputy sheriffs. How do we get there? I think we get there by reallocating that money that we had today, the $950,000, to the sheriff's department. We take a look at our workers' comp rates countywide. I know they've gone up, and I know we're self-funded, and I know the rates went up pretty high, and it went about $1.4 million higher in the sheriff's department than they were last year. Can we cut that in half? Can we mitigate it or push it over to the future? I don't know the answer to that today, but the point is that there's those types of opportunities. What other decisions can the sheriff make in reprioritizing the dollars that she has within the department? I mean, that's got to be on the table too. But it seems to me, if we move to this service and supply line item in transportation and travel, that's the starting point. That's the starting point. If we give direction to CEO and say, within that line item, find us $5 million in the next week or so, and let's see where it comes from, what the impacts are, and then we go from there and how we allocate it.
Supervisor, I'd like to speak to a couple things. I don't have the expertise to speak to them all. But the $950,000 we're talking about putting into the reserve, we did a presentation with S&P last week. One of the key things that Fresno County is weakest in, we have a really strong financial management team, and our story is really good, with the one exception. We have one of the smallest, if you will, financial stability reserves in the state. And comparatively speaking, we're probably only about 1/4 of where we should be, or 1/5 of where we really ought to be in our reserves. That $950,000 is one-time funding money. We have a structural deficit. So that's not going to help you next year or the following year. It is a one-time fix with one-time money. I highly recommend against it, and I think it speaks better for our financial conservatism to put it in our financial stability to reserve. I think that's a better plan and a better choice. What was the other thing? can't remember.
The rates for the workers' comp.
I can speak to a little bit to that. Obviously, from an A87 point of view, a cost accounting rule, the federal rules associated with cost accounting, you cannot artificially charge one user higher or give one user a rate holiday than you can. That's just against the rules, and it can't be done.
We've done it before, haven't we?
No, we have not. What we have done is deferred our liability out and sort of reduced the rates that we're charging all current users.
So we could do that.
We can, but we've done it for a number of years, and at some point, we really have to say, this is not the best business practice, but we are still making efforts to close that liability gap. But we have, for the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, extended that deferment period. So I don't think it should be an ongoing business practice for this county. I think at some point, we've got to say, here's our liability, we need to fund it, and we need to follow what the actuarial recommendations are.
And I guess the question for this board is, and I guess there's no good year, especially in the years right now, but is this the year that we take the big bite?
Next year is going to be difficult as well,
I
unless you rebalance
the
structure.
And the argument of one-time money, I get that, and nobody wants to create long-term liabilities with one-time money. But you know what? Probably 90% of the money we have in this county, if not 100%, is one-time money, because you just don't know what you're going to get, whether it's sales tax, property tax, and everything else that goes along with what we're dealing with. But the point here is we have a situation. And we could be talking about the DAs right now. We could be talking about what's happening in probation, but what we're talking about are the deputy sheriffs. And if this board is in the position and it's saying that we are not going to lay off 59 deputies that are on patrol today, then we have to get there. And we can have a discussion up here, and everybody can argue against everything that we're bringing up. At some point, we have to make the decisions because it's on us. That's why I think we need to go to broad policy direction. I mean, there may be some decisions that we're going to make that folks aren't going to like, and you're probably going to have really strong arguments as why we shouldn't do it. But if the goal is to not eliminate 59 deputy sheriffs, working with the sheriff and her making also additional choices within her department on how she moves some of her money around, I think we can get there. Then if we can use that model, then we go to the DA, then we go to probation, and when we talk about what their needs are. But that's where we need to go. If we allow ourselves to get in a trap today and start throwing out individual items, I guarantee you they're going to shoot down every item we bring up. And it's not that it's not good reason or logic behind what you're doing. You have good arguments. But at some point, we have to make the call. But before we can make the call, we need the information.
Well, by doing that, you're going to eliminate, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I agree with Supervisor Pachegian, but I can guarantee you, county services are going to be less and less. And yesterday, I dealt with two constituents very upset. They live on a county island inside the city of Fresno that neither the city of Fresno or the county is really taking care of. And those issues, if you're willing to take them, I'm willing to take them. Those are the issues that are going to come at us, because we are going to be doing a lot less county services throughout the county. And it's a tough situation because we still have to maintain roads. We still have to maintain some of our parks. We still have to offer services to the citizens of this community, no matter how tough it is. They expect some service, and we have to offer that service to the best of our ability. We just can't say, no, we're not going to do it.
I'd just like to respond to your comment about the rates, the increase in rates at the Sheriff's Department. Supervisor Perea, Beth Bandy, Personnel Services. The rates in the Sheriff's Department did go up this year. The rates in all departments did not necessarily go up this year. And I would be happy to prepare your board a report as to why that happened, what our methodology is, and then just give you some options of different confidence levels. We've approved, your board approved a confidence level of 75%. Based on the actuary's recommendation, but I can come back to your board, or I can send you a presentation and some information on some other options.
That'd be fine. And you know what we need to look at too is, and I understand that 75% confidence level, but maybe with the times we're dealing with, maybe we go at 70%, 65%. I mean, at some point, I know there's break-even points, but they're just percentages. They're just projections based on what they believe might happen.
And that's information I can give you with the savings that it would be to the Sheriff's Department and the rest of the county, and then it's, you know.
The only other thing I would add is, on the broader scale is just freezing all promotions. You know, no promotions throughout the county next year. I mean, I know promotions have been built into all of our budgets. Back them all out. I don't know what that represents, if it's $1 million, $2 or $3, whatever that number is. I would suggest we're in hard times.
Okay, I can look at that.
We need to back out promotions countywide, I believe.
I guess I have a question on compensation insurance. By going 75%, when is the call date that says you got to make up the difference on this? And there's going to be a call date. You have to make up the difference where you bring your compensation back to your normal funding.
I think that, Vicki, I think we have, right now we have five more years, small bit.
This, Maved Mora with Personnel Services. This will be, fiscal year 2010-11 will be the fourth year that we've underfunded the program, either by reducing the confidence level or not putting any money into to fund the deficit. So it was originally supposed to be a 10-year plan. The recommendation by the actuary for the current year is that we would put in about $4.6 million so that it would be paid over the next 5 years. And then that would bring us back to the original plan. It would still be extended to about a 12-year plan rather than a 10-year plan from the original date when we started putting money towards it to eliminate
Have we
it.
ever looked to see that self-funding workman's comp is a better choice than to just purchase workman's comp insurance?
Just to give you a little more information on the program itself, we are self-funded up to, just up to $500,000 per claim.
And then
So we actually do have excess insurance for any claims that exceed that. We participate in the CSAC EIA risk pool, so there are premiums that we pay towards that pool. We share the risk with other counties to cover any claims that are above that amount.
And have you guys examined, are there other opportunities for us to reduce our workers' comp costs? Like if we go to a different carrier, is it going to be cheaper?
We don't really have a carrier. We're self-insured for it. The only thing that we do is we do have a TPA that manages our claims, but that is not the bulk of the cost in the program. Really, the cost in the program is the cost of the claims, which continue to rise. Along with that is requirements for reserves that we need to set aside, cash reserves that are required to be set aside. GASB 10 requires that we set a level of money aside so that we have sufficient funding in the event that we needed to liquidate all of our claims.
What I'm asking is, have you looked at, what if we go from being self-insured to going with a carrier? Have you looked at those costs? I mean, is that an opportunity for us to save money or use the reserves for that sort of thing?
And the other question is have we analyzed our cost? If we have increasing costs of claims and workman's comp, what's causing that? What's driving it? Are employees getting hurt more often? What's our safety record, safety program? It's a place to look for whether we're spending our money wisely or not.
Greg Borboa, Personnel Services. The first question is relative to moving to a fully insured program. You would be required to pay a premium to an insurer without any flexibility on funding on an annual basis for claims that are estimated to occur in the year coming. You would still have to maintain a reserve and administer the claims that are currently opened at the date that you would move to that. So you'd still have
So my
an
question
insurance.
is, Greg, let me just, you don't need to go through all that, but have you guys looked at that as an alternative? I mean, would it save us money? Is it cheaper? Or are we doing what is the most economical way to cover it?
We're doing what is the most economical, and
You're
it
certain
offers
of
the
that?
flexibility. Yes, I am.
Okay. That was just really my only question.
And the other question regarding claim costs, we've actually, in the last 5 years, reduced the number of claims from approximately 900 a year down below 700 a year. But unfortunately, statewide, trends are that medical costs increase. And that's the largest cost driver for workers' compensation today. A lot of it is in response to legal machinations that occurred after the 2004-2005 reform. So it was a correction, unfortunately, that is occurring statewide for the workers'
So
compensation
Greg,
system.
how much money is in that fund, the workers' comp fund? Because, you assess every department, probably has every department's assessment for this fiscal year gone up as opposed to last year? I've heard from a couple that it has gone up substantially. I assume every department has gone up.
No, that's not necessarily the case. Some of the departments' rate over last year have gone down. This is, I would be happy to come back to you with a report that explains this. We don't have all the information that you need right now, but it's really assessed on the experience and the exposure, 80% on the experience and 20% on the exposure. The exposure is projected future costs, and one of the things that they take into consideration is increases in pay. So, right, so 20% of the needed 19.1 million. The 19.1 million is what we need to fund the program at 75% right now with the $2 million recovery of the deficit.
And
So-
last year, you gave out $19 million in, what do you call them? Not benefits.
No.
Compensation.
No.
How much did you actually use for compensation, and what happens to the rest of it?
Okay, let me explain. No, not everything that is funded is for that year's costs associated with claims. Basically, the actuary looks at various things in developing the recommendations for where we should fund the program each year. They look at claim costs. They also look at a margin for a contingency for anything that may arise in the future. They also determine reserve requirements. That's one of the biggest things affecting this program, the cash that needs to be set aside so that there is sufficient money to pay off claims that may arise in the future as well.
So how much do you have in that fund
As
for
of
the
June
future?
30th, as of June 30th of '09, which is the most recent fiscal year that is closed, and we know exactly where we're at there, we had cash of $35 million in the program. However, the related liabilities for the claims was $55 million, which is how we end up in a deficit of $20 million.
Maybe what we should request is additional information and an analysis of where we are with workman's comp. That seems to be one of the places to look in terms of big-ticket items and how we provide direction today to the staff. I don't know that we can do the absolute detail down to the budget. Again, the budget packets aren't yet available. But I think what you're hearing from the board is an interest to see how this money gets distributed into budgets to really know what the big-ticket items are. I've had meetings with Chief Dyer and Mayor Swearingen and our sheriff, just discussing different best practices between the county, what the county does, what the city of Fresno does. One of the things that came out of that the police chief in the city of Fresno really likes is he can go out and get things, looking for the best deal, getting a contract with somebody to get the services and supplies he needs. And I don't think we've had that much latitude in our county to do some of those things. So it was an area of discussion, I think, of some interest also.
And these are two tough ones, but I think, can you tell us the 40-hour furlough that was implemented countywide, what that did save the county?
County cost about $700,000 for those 3 bargaining groups.
No, I'm not talking
That's
about
just
today.
three
I'm
groups.
talking about in general. Overall, entire county, 40-hour furlough.
2.5 million net county cost.
2.5 million. So, the budgeting, you take another 40, you save 2.5 million, maybe impossible layoffs. I mean, it's not pretty to look at it that way. And, but I think we do need to look at we need to get the information on what a reduced work week would do, what another 40-hour would do. I think you have to have that information. I'm not sure I want to go there. I would rather go with a few of the other ideas first, but I think it has to be out there, so you're looking at it. If it's going to save us, 2.5 million, that's jobs, that's people.
Just like the promotion issue,
Mhm.
they're still embedded into the
I
county
mean, what are the
system.
numbers? What does that do?
Part of our strategy has been, and we started to meet and confer with various bargaining groups on a reduction, and we've had that discussion before your board in closed session. But the dilemma, when you start getting into too heavy of a deferral or a furlough, say 80 hours, then you run into a situation where there's requests for exemptions because they have to staff the court. They have to staff a 24/7 operation, and you run into those measures, so your return gets diminished real rapidly. So we have pursued this year something different than pursuing an additional 40-hour. We're looking for something that would not run across those same dilemmas of exemptions, but it would be more applicable straight across the board to every employee without exemptions.
And I'm fine with that, but I just think that, I hope that the message is that we're looking at everything. We're looking at every dollar, we're turning over every stone that we possibly can, because we do believe, this board does believe that the sheriff's department, the district attorney, probation, we need to try to find some money, and if we do find money between those three departments, that's where it's headed.
Well, that workers' comp is just going up every year, it seems like here at the Sheriff's
Yeah, it is.
Department. Last
Without
year was
control.
$6,104,000, and now it's $7,300,000, up $8,200 in just 1 year.
And that's because of their additional claims.
Yeah.
They've had more claims.
Well,
Well, I mean,
and
it's
that's
real-
something
it's a
to
real
work on
cost.
as well.
Yeah.
That's something to work on. That's what a lot of businesses have been working on.
But what you
know.
can't do by law is make all the other departments pay for their additional claims.
No, we understand.
They have to pay for that.
Well, I would certainly be prepared today to take travel out of the budget. It's one of those line items, and I would certainly be willing today to eliminate any car that's not driven 500 miles, as I recall from the audit. That was about 244 cars, and just take care of that today. I'd be very happy to. I'd like to explore the freezing of promotions, because we can afford to enhance wages in these times. And I know people wait and they want to see advancement. I don't think that's a long-term solution. It really needs to be a short-term solution. But I have some concerns. Though we found a way to the 40-hour furlough, I think there's some elements of our benefit package, particularly for employees that have stayed 10-plus years, our paid time off just is so, it's pretty enhanced, where we end up with employees being paid and being off, and then they can't get the time off that has been entitled to them through this county, and there's a real frustration out there. We cap it, they lose it, there's all sorts of elements to that. I'd like to see us on the long term work with our labor groups on what is a more reasonable level of paid holiday time, paid vacation time, and what's more reasonable with that. I don't want to take away particularly other areas. I think it needs to be a discussion, but I think we have a lot of long-term employees that earn so much paid time off, they can't take it, then they lose it through caps and other things, and I think we could do that much better than we do. But today, I'm willing to take out the travel, I'm willing to take out the cars, I'm willing to look at freezing promotions. I don't know if there's other places. I'm looking at outsourcing, willing to take cuts in services and supplies just across the board, because we can't do it by onesies and twosies, I don't think, and meet the area. And I'm willing, I think workers' comp is an area that we'll really need to have better information on.
Well, and I would prefer that we get the whole picture, or try to get more of the whole picture before we start piecemealing it. I agree on those. I'm happy to look at them, but, I'd like to see from the CAO more of the whole picture of everything we've kind of talked about today, and then come back and say, which ones are we willing to do, or which ones can we do, can't we do? With the 40-hour furlough, I'm not actually promoting that as much as I would like to see other things happen. I'd like to look at our holidays and that type of thing. But I do think that people should know that it's on the table, or hopefully that it can be on the table, because that will save layoffs, however you look at it.
And we will continue to have the dialogue with labor. We've had those discussions. We will renew those discussions again. Many of those items require meeting, confer, and agreement by labor. So it's one thing to throw it out. It's
Right.
another thing to say we can't do anything. We can't do it because we're not in an open contract period. And here again, we'll go into a quilt approach where you may have a few that can and the majority that can't. And it won't be unilateral just by the fact of how we have 25 bargaining agreements, and each one is different and unique, with different language, with certain restrictions that others don't have.
Right.
So we'll be happy to do that, but have full knowledge board that that's the dilemma staff is faced when we do the deep dive and we do the meetings. It's difficult, and it's many times, it's not going to give you the end result. And that's why we have focused on stuff that does give you the biggest bang for the buck, that is implemented straight across the board. But that's clearly something we'll be happy to do and re-engage.
That's why our direction has to be clear today, and I agree with everything you've said, Chair Case, as far as where we should be looking at. You know, there's the short term and there's the long term. You know, the long term are the things that's going to require discussions with the unions. If we're going to really look at outsourcing functions of the county, that's going to take some time for them to do analysis. It's not going to get done in the next 2-3 weeks, but we should give that direction moving forward to next year. The immediate goal is, and creating the template for how we then deal with the other justice departments, is if we give direction today that we are not going to be eliminating these 59 deputy sheriffs, and we want you to go back and take a look at these areas that you mentioned, which do not require union discussion or anything. We don't need anybody's permission to go into our services and supplies, to freeze promotions, to go back on our workers' comp rates if it makes sense, and the cars, et cetera. We don't need anybody's permission other than us just getting the information, making a decision. So I believe that's the direction we should go for the short term. Use that as the model, like I said, and then move forward in the next few weeks and deal with the other justice departments.
And further clarification, Supervisor Perea, and then that, as I recall, in your approach, there was also an element of further reduction within that department in service and supplies.
Absolutely.
So it's not a total fill back, it's a partial fill back with that department having to find the
Correct.
savings internally within their budget to make whole.
Right. Yeah, because we have to acknowledge and respect the fact that every county department has made tremendous sacrifice today, but you know what, there's more coming. And if we're going to be moving $4 or $5 million out of other county departments to help close this gap for these 59 deputy sheriffs, then the sheriffs has to work with us. And I know the sheriff has made a lot of cuts herself, but it's a little more tightening of the belt, a little more prioritizing of dollars within the sheriff's department to help close that $7.8 million gap. And that's fair, and that's fair.
Yeah. And what we will also do is pursue, again, discussions with bargaining units that are located within those departments for further labor concessions. Because it's one thing to say you're going to carve it out of services and supply some, and you're going to carve it out of other departments. I think there has to be a recognition that that bargaining unit in that department has to come to the table, or we have to have a separate discussion then on how much we can do to backfill and to mitigate those layoffs.
Yeah, but when you set up meetings and they don't come to the table, then what do you do?
Then
And we're experiencing that too.
Then it's a different discussion for your board to have. And that means then you have to, at some point, recognize layoffs are inevitable. It's going to happen.
Well, I think we need to recognize that today, that layoffs are inevitable. We're going to have layoffs.
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks we're not is dreaming.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
And-
The question
and I-
is where? Where will they, they're going to hurt wherever we do it, but where? And as far as I'm concerned, and I know we all agree, taking 30% of the patrol deputies off the street is not acceptable, period. I think we all agree with that. So let's get to work and let's figure this one out.
I agree with that, but I think that the sheriff needs to make cuts in other areas too.
I agree too.
And that's where
I
we have
agree.
to look at that too. And I don't agree that if we take money out of other departments, that everything goes to the sheriff first. I think we have to look at the DA, probation, public defender in the same. I mean, you've got to keep balance in the justice departments. You
I
can't.
agree.
You can't treat one separately.
I think my
As-
statement was to public safety, so that includes all of them.
And I'm willing to look at all those things that you mentioned, Chair, as long as they apply to everybody across the board, all departments,
I agree across the
including those
board.
departments that we're trying to help.
And on the one item, so we're clear from your board on our mission as it deals with outsourcing or contracting out, that there is support, majority support from your board to push forward with that, knowing it's going to be displacing county employees, but that's something we will do because we have to notice labor regardless of our.
But that's a plan B. That's the long-term strategy. Okay, I think the last thing you want to do is lose, right, at least I think, lose a lot of your focus in the next 2-3 weeks in noticing all these unions and putting everything out to bid. I mean, we want you to do that, but I think that's a strategy. It's going to take you a while to get there. I think the immediate is how do we go into the existing pots that we have that do not require anybody's permission to do, get us that information and let's go. Don't let what you're doing, this process, hold up this other one.
No, I just need to commence that process. I want to be clear that I understand what my goal is for this fiscal year, but like anything has taught me in this last year in this chair, the budget is fluid.
Yeah.
It changes throughout we've been doing budgets for 18 months to 24 months and doing amendments, reductions, and adjustments. We continue to have Beelance and hearings. So let's not kid ourselves. If that's the direction we're going to take, that's the direction we start. And we start now, because I know that even though if we adopt in June, the governor most likely is not going to have a state budget until August. We'll be back in your board in September for an adjustment of the budget. So it makes sense, if we're going to do this, that we start knowing that we'll be adjusting our budget even though we adopt it in June. We're going to be adjusting it next fiscal year, and we better have the data, I would think, where we're going to contract out to reduce our cost.
And one of the areas we should look at there are the ISFs.
It's everything.
Yeah.
I mean, no,
We didn't talk about the ISFs.
It's,
but
no, when
those
I say
costs-
everything, it's ISFs, it's everything.
And I do think that's doable maybe for halfway through this fiscal year. I mean, there might be some that are easier to do than others, easier to look at than others, easier to bid out than others, or discuss. You know, I say you come up with a comprehensive list and start, prioritize them and which ones might be easier or save us the most, and looking to maybe even implement some January 1st if this board chooses to do that.
And I just want to underscore one last time, when you look at our services and supplies accounts and the transportation, travel, and education, $499 million, that is the greatest immediate opportunity to find these funds. And that, I believe that also includes all these service contracts that departments have, whether it's, fixing the copy machine, whatever. I think every contract needs to be taken a look at, needs to be reopened, needs to be canceled or reduced in cost, and I think we can get to the numbers that we need now, but it's a quick gap fix. We need those long-term strategies that then you'll be working on for us too. But I'll go back to, again, today we're talking about 59 deputy sheriffs, and we're not going to lay any off, so that's the way it is.
I would agree with you, Supervisor Perea. Our focus really needs to be on maintaining services in the most important areas, and you have to put the money in there first before you consider other items.
Right.
And that's a real key element to any budgeting process. Additional comments? This is really a board discussion item. I don't believe public comment would be appropriate this time. It's not a budget hearing.
It's not a budget hearing, but it is it is on your agenda.
So we should open
Yes.
it up. Okay, if anybody has, again, this is not our budget hearing, so we can't do that, but if maybe somebody has a burning idea on how to save money.
Eric Schmidt, President, Fresno Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm here every week. I think this is one of the most productive discussions I've seen the board have in a long time. I think the goal here obviously is in our interest. 59 deputy sheriffs taken off the streets is something nobody wants to see. All 5 of you, I believe. There's been a lot of good ideas. Supervisor Pacheco, you've had some excellent ideas, stuff we've always talked about amongst ourselves in the Sheriff's Department. As far as the labor aspect of it, just so I'll touch on it, we come to the table all the time. I think John will recognize that. We started the 40-hour furloughs. We reopened again at the end of this year. Since the end of December of 2006 to the present day, the Fresno Deputy Sheriff's Association has taken a 3% pay increase. So we're coming off 4 years. Our hand is not out there. That is not the strategy we have. We're here to serve the public, yet we have to provide for our families at the same time, and everybody acknowledges that. There are places we've looked at. We've touched on the workers' comp rates, 1.4 million. Fiscal year 09-10, we went from 5,400 roughly per employee up to $8,200 an employee for this fiscal year. That's quite a bit of money. Granted, we do have injuries and deaths in our department, but I haven't seen what the payout has been on that. Jail facility services. Population of that is down 50%. Even if we were to reduce that number 0.25% of what we're paying, that's $1.6 million in ISFs. The public safety information system, that money was transferred, $2.6 million transferred to the sheriff's budget with no backfill behind it. I believe that came from the CAO's miscellaneous fund in the 3 prior years. Satellite jail, which has been off the table for the last 2 fiscal years, we're still paying a premium on it, $172,000. All this money can go towards rescinding layoffs in the sheriff's office, in the tune of roughly $5 million. Something just to think about. Talking about outsourcing, that's one area I believe we cannot do. As a deputy sheriff, we can't outsource. We're the last stop. There's nobody else that's going to do our job in the unincorporated areas. We know that. The public knows that. The public's made it very evident to us, or very firm to us, that they want their deputy sheriffs. They like their service. And we are a customer service based organization. And so I believe that tradition is going to continue. And I'm glad to hear the focus today is to not lay off 59 deputy sheriffs. We'll work with you, try to find it somewhere, but I believe that's a very constructive conversation.
I'd like to just say one more thing. Thank you for those comments. For any county employees that are listening, I attend a lot of events, and I always, inevitably a county employee will come up, I know how you can save some money here. I know how you can save some money there. Well, you know what? I encourage anyone that's listening, if you've got an idea, share it with us.
Maybe that could be set up on our county website or intranet. I think that would be a great
You're out
thing
there,
to get.
you're in the departments, you know where some money can be saved, or where you would think, and I would say share it, send it to us.
I think that's a great idea. And a website-based idea that people can get information to us, because I have the same experience. People come up at various things, and our employees are scared, and I understand that. I understand these are very difficult times for all, but I think our employees can also be really helpful, as we just heard.
Good morning, Chair Case, Supervisors. Josie Reese, Correctional Officer.
You might have to speak up, or can we turn the...
Turn the mic. Get close
Yeah,
to the
the-
mic, Josie.
Okay, I'll get over here. As you were talking about, there are, last year this year in February, we all made concessions. The patrol side, the jail side made concessions, in addition to the furlough, which last year, as you remember, it would be just like what you did today. You imposed it on 3 units, but we asked the other units to come together, and all the units who even weren't being part of the mandatory furlough, they agreed to do this furlough and gave 40 hours. And it was a substantial amount of money that was given to the county at that time. We got the layoffs. In February, when this happened again, you came and we gave the $1 million. Where did the layoffs come? In the jail. Even though we gave the $1 million, even though there's no guarantee. But now that we're going through budget meetings with the SEIU and all the other units with the county, which probably represent a good majority of the county employees, that left a sour taste in their mouth right now, because they feel that any money that they tried to give, any concessions that they tried to give at this time, is of what? There's still going to be layoffs. Jail floors are going to be closed, because currently right now, next month, another floor is going to be closed again. That's going to be going because 21 more COs are going to be laid off. So that means another floor will be closed. 400 plus will be let go. On top of that, the revolving door will be there in the jail, and it's coming. And so because I don't know whether guarantees can be put in for some of these units like probation. At JJC, they may lose another pod at JJC. They're releasing also many juveniles back out onto the streets that they didn't before. There's a lot and there's other units that are looking that may be willing to give possibly, but it's about the guarantee of their jobs and where the money's going to go, and keeping department heads accountable for their budgets. And right now, sad to say, but they don't have any confidence that they feel that the money that they give will go to the sheriff's department, and we'll still have layoffs and things will go on, and there's no accountability, is how they feel. And maybe that's the way it's going to be, where we're going to have, the layoffs are going to be coming, but that's what's hard to turn the people, because we gave $1 million last year. It's hard right now. A lot of people gave up a lot of money to save the employees that they have. And yes, it could have been up to 69 people going out. We lost 15, 20 other people left and went to other departments, because they knew layoffs were coming in at this time in June. But they actually, gave. And you know what? In our hearts right now, we knew we gave to save. But with the layoffs, we're the only ones that are getting hit. Right now at the jail, more and more of those floors are going on. And I read, I think I know you're talking about the deputy sheriff's positions currently right now, the 59, but it also states in here to reestablish budget orgs. Is that part of the discussion, or I don't know what that meant in the proposal right here, or in your addendum right here? Is that
Well,
redoing
it's
the
an
orgs?
item that was on the agenda at the last meeting, and then this item here took precedence. And I believe just having here discussion, I think John will give us some information and feedback on that as he brings us back information.
So it hasn't have anything to do with the jail, with the orgs, or the budget, or the
Not
sheriff
today.
orgs? Okay.
Yeah.
It's on today's agenda.
But right now, like I said, people are willing to give. There's a lot of, SEIU takes a hit on a lot of the raises and things that they have, but people are willing to give. It's just the idea of the guarantees that are out there for the positions that they have, because it seems like that we're the only ones that are getting hit with actual layoffs. And it's sad that another floor will be closed, and probably within a month, we're going to have another floor closed, and 21 people are going to be going out the door also. So.
Anna Casey, Correctional Officer. Supervisor Puchigan, you're hoping that other county employees were listening and maybe giving suggestions. Has this board ever considered or had discussions about early retirement for safety positions, buyout, a cash payout, or anything like that? I know something was offered to the general membership, but nothing was offered to the safety. So I'm just curious if that discussion has ever been discussed among you. Because if you have
That was
safety
not
officer-
discussed on this board today.
I'm sorry?
That was not discussed by this board today.
Board Member Puchigan was asking for ideas, so. I wrote it
So
That's
you're
an idea that I
suggesting it.
have.
Yes, thank you.
I wrote it down.
If you, it's our position that if people who are getting ready to retire, that are safety members, and they're considering retiring in a year or two, or maybe a couple of months, you will save money there rather than at the bottom, to lay off the lower paid employees, so.
But if you also look at too, on, right now with what is proposed of the amount of COs after the 21 layoffs, we'll have one sergeant for every 10 COs. We'll have supervising, 7 lieutenants for a facility and a half is all we're going to have, and we have 7 lieutenants. And I'm sure on the patrol side, there's the same amount. You cut all the bottom, we went from 422 all the way down to, I think it's going to be somewhere around 300. And our supervisor staff hasn't changed at all. All the hits are at the bottom, and some of those supervisors' positions.
If I might, our agenda item is directly related to the deputy sheriffs, and the budget hearing is starting on the 13th. We know we'll have those discussions, and I think they're really important. But today, in light of the hour and the fact we're not even close to finishing our morning agenda, I'm going to keep us on task.
Okay. Well, I was just saying, because it is the sheriff's department, there's ways to save money on the department. I only know my department exactly how we have. I was just trying to say, I'm probably on the patrol side, if they do go down or what it is, to look at management staff also to see where it can be done also, which is save a vast amount of money in there too, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon now. Scott Jones, Undersheriff. There is no plan to close another floor in the jail.
Thank
We
you.
just want that on record.
Thank you, Undersheriff. Any other public comments on this item? Then I think direction's been given to the board, and you can certainly hear the perspective of the board in not wanting to lose public safety in this whole dialogue. So, board members, it is almost 20 after 12. Would you like a short break for lunch, or you want to just go straight into our next item?
Let's keep going. Let's just keep going.
We can't get going and going after? Okay, then we'll open to the next one.
Madam Chair, the next item before you is under the Administrative Office. It's Addendum Item B. This item was continued from last Tuesday to today. Consider and take action on county's purchase of Crocker Building at 2123, 2125, 2135, and 2145 Fresno and 1223 L Street, Fresno, pursuant to county's option to purchase agreement with Crocker Building Partners dated December 5th, 2006. Approve and authorize chairman to execute county's exclusive purchase option, exercise notice, and sale and purchase agreement and escrow instructions with seller. Approve and accept seller's grant deed for county's purchase of Crocker Building. Authorize and direct county officers to take all necessary and appropriate actions to finalize such county purchase. Authorize county's use and allocation of up to $4,015,206 tobacco securitization bond